Section 9 of 11 Stories by Henry Hasse. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Cinda J.M. City of the Living Flame, Part 3. 6. His mind came surging slowly back up from the dark depths of nightmare. His head ached unbearably. He had thought an insistent warning voice was crying out at him. He opened his eyes. This was no nightmare, for memory came back in a rushing flood, and he still heard the voice, low and warning and very close to his ear. "Do not move, Jim Landor. Do not say anything. Just listen. This is Ka'arji. I am here, close by you." Ka'arji! Jim had almost forgotten about Ka'arji. Then he took the warning and tried not even to think. He just listened in a detached manner. "We are in a room off the corridor. That dimming thing is only a few hundred feet away. I hope it has not contacted your mind again, for I have something important to tell you. It is a good thing you followed me here so closely, for the dimming withdrew its concentration from me and centered on you. Thus I was able to slip past this place, and I explored a little. Jim Landor, below these corridors I have discovered a huge room full of machinery. I cannot understand it all, for I have not a scientific mind, but I thought if we could escape from here, and I could take you to this place." Slowly, Jim allowed his mind to relax. He felt no more of the probing mental fingers in his brain. "It's all right, Ka'arji. We can speak freely now. I suppose that's where Barullo caught you, in that secret room?" "Yes, it seems to be his living quarters as well." "I think I know what that machinery is, Ka'arji. It's vital to the existence of Montanak. If only we can get back there." Jim rose to his feet and looked about the room. It was small and empty. The walls were of marble. He walked over to the single door leading to the corridor. He tried it, and to his surprise, it opened easily. But he staggered back as if from a violent physical blow as the radiations from the dimming lashed against him. Our little playmate again." Jim rubbed his half-blinded eyes. "Clever devil, that Barullo. He knows that no man could escape through that. He was so sure of it that he didn't even remove my electro-pistol from me." As the pain passed from his eyes, he removed his pistol and felt the comfortable weight of it in his hand. But he thrust it back into his belt again, knowing it was useless against the dimming. Then an idea struck him like a thunderbolt. "Ka'arji, we may walk from this room yet. I have one weapon that Barullo hasn't counted on, and that is the dimming's hatred of Barullo." Hurrying to the door again, he opened it infinitesimally, and he leaped back to the furthermost confines of the room as the dimming's thought emanations came flooding inside in a gentle greenish haze. Jim centered all of his mind now on the one all-important thought. "Barullo, I shall kill him. He thinks he will keep me here and feed my mind to the dimming, but somehow I'll escape from here and kill Barullo. I swear it." He strove to arouse an overwhelming hatred in his mind for the ages-old little Martian. The dimming's power surged anew. He felt the alien entity's mental fingers grab hold of his mind again. He stifled the rising exultance and reiterated his resolution to kill Barullo. Now he noticed that the dimming's mental presence was expanding through the very marble walls themselves. As never before, he began to appreciate the potential power of the thing. But with an effort, he repeated his oath to kill Barullo. It became now not so much an oath as a promise, for he knew the dimming had tightly grasped his mind and was listening. It was easy. So ridiculously easy that Jim should have been suspicious, but was not. "If you mean it," the dimming spoke to Jim's mind at last. "If I thought you really would." "I mean it." Jim flashed the thought fervently. "Let me out of here and I will rid you of Barullo once and for all." He almost laughed aloud. Slowly, Hesitantly, the thing's mental barrier was fading away. Jim stepped to the door and opened it widely. Nothing beat him back now. He motioned to Ka'arji, who followed him almost frightenedly out into the corridor. There, the mental power of the dimming was a little more in evidence, but not enough to stop them. It was as though it were watching. "This way," Ka'arji breathed at last. He led Jim in the opposite direction from the dimming, then into a cross corridor that extended interminably. At last they reached a door that opened onto stone steps leading downward. "Careful," Ka'arji warned as he led the way slowly. He didn't need to warn Jim. The latter was wary as never before, and he kept his hand always near his electro-pistol. Something was vaguely wrong about all this, but he didn't know what. For one thing, it seemed too easy. At the bottom of the steps was another sliding door. Ka'arji paused before it and whispered, "This is the room." Jim stood still, listening. There was no sound from beyond that door. The silence was a vast womb about them, menacing. Jim slid the door noiselessly open. They stepped inside and stared around. They saw huge circling tiers of peculiarly constructed dynamos. They were in operation, Jim knew that, for he could feel a certain surge of power even though there was no sound. A bewildering network of cables led from the dynamos to a central, predominating machine that towered fan-like above them all. It was this electronic tower, he knew, that created the swirling pillars of strength that surged upward and outward to support the vast cavern roof overhead. Then they saw Barullo. He was in a little glassite room at the foot of the electronic tower. Tiny wheels and dials were banked around him, and he was busy making delicate adjustments. So busy that he didn't see them standing just inside the door. Now Jim heard the insistent voice of the dimming in his mind again. "Kill him! Do it at once! Do as you promised!" Jim didn't need the prompting voice. He wasn't going to ray a man down from behind. Besides, he doubted if his beam would penetrate that glassite cage. He stepped quickly to one of the dynamo stanchions and drew Ka'arji down beside him. He waited. Despite the dimming's impatience that he could feel seething within him, Barullo finished his adjustments at last and stepped out of the cage. He was still a good 50 feet from Jim. He turned to go deeper into the maze of machinery. Jim arose and said quietly, "Barullo." The aged Martian whirled with amazing agility. Jim saw the look of incredulity that leaped into his eyes. Barullo leaned heavily forward, his two hands snarling about his cane. Then his lips quirked into a toothless smile, and he started to say something. That was to throw Jim off guard. Simultaneous with his speech, he lifted his hands lightning-like and the cane leveled. But Jim was expecting that. With a single, sinuous movement, his pistol was in his hand. Its bluish beam was penciling out. It caught Barullo squarely in the chest before he could press the button on his own weapon. He staggered forward. His cane weapon sagged. He tried to level it again but could not. Still he staggered forward. Hatred mingled with horror in his eyes. With amazing strength his spindly legs carried him across the room as he mouthed unintelligible Martian words. Jim fell back a step. He hoped Barullo would not find strength in his arms. Would that damned Martian never die? Jim knew his beam had bored a hole clear through the creature's chest. He could see the blackish blood oozing from it. Jim felt a cold horror gnawing at the pit of his stomach even as he aimed carefully, and the electro beam flashed out 3 more times. He saw 3 more holes rake across the Martian's chest. Barullo fell with a crash right at Jim's feet, and the cane clattered from his fingers. Even the mask of death could not erase the hate from those ebon eyes as Barullo stared lifelessly up at him. Jim shuddered once, then reached out with his foot and turned Barullo over so that he lay face downward. He was aware of Ka'arji standing beside him, and Ka'arji saying quickly, tensely, "Jim Landor, you remember when I said that this time I should not return from the polar wastes? This is what I meant. I know now what I must do. But you must hurry. Get back and tell the other men, or none of you will ever leave Montauk." Jim stared at him uncomprehendingly, trying to listen at the same time to Ka'arji and to the jubilant voice of the dimming that was surging in him again. Ka'arji, what do you mean? I mean, Jim Landor, that I know the intentions of the dimming. I know at last what has happened to my race and what might happen to Earth, but it shall not happen. Ka'arji leapt toward the glassite cage at the foot of the electronic tower. In a few strides he was there, had hurled himself within it, and barred the door behind him. His eyes were glowing and purposeful as he stared out at Jim, who came running. You had better hurry, Jim Landor, and warn the others. Do not try to stop me, for I have a feeling this cage is impregnable. In a very short time I can wreck these controls. The electronic zones will cease, and the entire cavern roof will collapse under the pressure of millions of tons. Get back to the others and escape from Montanak. He turned deliberately and examined the controls banked around him. He reached to his pouch of Tasith stems and placed a few of them in his mouth before he continued. I suggest you try to distract the dimming's thought as much as possible so it won't center on me here. I will try to hold out for half an hour at least, longer if possible, but hurry. Conflicting emotions swept across Jim like a flood, but were beaten down by the cold realization that Ka'arji intended to carry this thing through without compromise. The Martian would destroy all of Montanak, including the dimming and himself, in an endeavor to save Earth from the thing that had happened so subtly on Mars. Jim whirled, started to race away, but turned back. All right, Ka'arji. Thanks seems a pretty feeble word for what you were doing, but if I get back to Earth, I shall see that you are never forgotten for this. Now give me the rest of those Tasith stems. I have an idea. Without question, Ka'arji opened the glassite door and tossed out the pouch of stems. Jim snatched it up and raced away without a backward glance. He hurried from the room and up the stone stairs to the corridors again. There, the dimming's power struck more forcefully into his mind. It seemed somehow diabolically gleeful, but Jim hurried on, hurried toward the evil entity. Finally, he stood at the foot of the towering well and saw the spinning globular shape descend upon its coalescing pillar of light. You did it well, the thought came flashing. You kept your promise. The thing I have dreamed of for ages has happened. Barullo is out of my way, and I have a free hand. Yes, Earthman, now I see in your mind everything that Barullo told you. There are other Earthmen here, completing a huge ship by which to go back to your planet. That is what Barullo was counting on. That is what he would not tell me. He had planned to take me to Earth and there keep me under his control as he has here. But now that you have so kindly removed Barullo, I can do this myself. I need only wait until the men have completed their ship, then blast their minds to annihilation. This dimming was the ultimate evil, not Barullo. Jim had known it all along, and now he realized how he had played into its hands. A momentary panic seized him. He could picture the thing landing the spaceship on Earth's northern or southern polar ice, or in the unexplored depths of Brazilian jungle. Hidden from the sight and knowledge of men for years, it would carry on the subtle destruction of Earthian minds as it had Martian, and now, unhampered by Barullo, it would grow in size and potency until who could say what the end would be? Perhaps there would be no end. There were other planets besides Mars and Earth. Thank you, Earthmen. That is a thought I will remember. But your mental pictures of the terrain of Earth were rather vague. Show me more clearly. Jim felt the agonizing mental fingers tearing the tissues of his brain apart. At the base of the well, he saw the obscure little door Barullo had opened to manipulate the pale, penciling beams. Instantly, Jim was on his knees, had wrenched it open. He did not try to work the beams, knowing the dimming could have stopped him in an instant. He merely tossed the pouch of Tasith stems out into the central floor of the well and rose quickly. There's an offering for you. I kept my promise and killed Barullo. Now you keep yours and let me go. The entity had made no such promise, and Jim knew it, but he whirled and raced down the corridor unheeded. It was only the element of surprise that would carry him through now, surprise and utter wildness. He even laughed wildly aloud as he ran on, and nothing stopped him. Nothing stopped him until he was halfway to the outer door leading to the street. Then he felt a terrific impact. He stumbled, fell to his knees, and toppled forward on his face. He arose against a tremendous physical pressure and staggered on. Again he felt that impact as he was battered against the marble corridor walls, but with a fierce tenacity he kept his feet and kept going. He reached the street. His legs were heavy as if he were fighting against 100 gravities. He felt the dimming was merely toying with him, as a cat with a mouse. As Jim hurried on, or tried to hurry, to the place where he would find Conley and Spurlin and the score of other men, he knew that one man could not hope to stand against that awful power, but perhaps many men in perfect mental accord. Again he felt the strange, fierce tingling in every fiber of his being until he thought he was walking in a sluggish sea of fire. It seemed hours later when he reached the familiar building and hurried along the metal-lined tunnel where the dimming's radiation seemed a little less intense. It was with a feeling of profound gratitude that he pushed through a final door and sank down into a soothing oblivion, but not before he glimpsed many men rushing toward him with surprised shouts. Among them he saw Conley. 7. Jim opened his eyes and stared up into Conley's worried face. He coughed a little on the stinging liquor the latter was pouring down his throat. "How long have I been here?" he asked urgently. "Just a minute or two, lad. You're mighty battered and tired, but you'll be all right now. Just rest a while." "Rest," Jim repeated and climbed quickly to his feet. "None of us can rest now. There's no time. It may be too late already, but we've got to make a fight for it, if for no other reason than because Ka'arji's counting on it. No, Conley, I'm not delirious." He waved the worried Irishman away. "Listen, you men. I've solved the mystery of Matonac, and we've got to get out of here." In an anxious rush of words, he explained the situation, told briefly of his discovery of the dimming and what it was, and of Ka'arji's avowal to destroy all of Matonac. "In another few weeks, Spurlin, your spaceship would have been finished, and the greatest horror the universe has ever known would have launched itself upon Earth. It still might happen. We've got to get back out there at once, en masse, and hold that thing's attention before it discovers what Ka'arji's up to." It had all happened too suddenly for the men to quite believe him. They looked askance at each other. "But after 3 years of heartbreaking work," Spurlin said, "to give up my spaceship now? That's what you're asking." "Hell of a lot of good your spaceship will be with millions of tons of rock and ice heaped on it. That's gonna happen about 15 minutes from now, or less. Man, don't you understand? Ka'arji said he'd give me a half hour." "It's a trick," Wessel squawked loudly. "Damn funny that he ever got back to us here at all. He discovered a protection against those greenish rays. He's trying to lure us all outside to our death so he can have all this new metal for himself." Jim strode back to the door, pausing only long enough to cry, "All right, stay here then, and die, all of you. If you won't help me, that means our last chance is gone. I'll die too, but it'll be out there, fighting that thing to the last." "I'm with you, Jim. I believe you." It was Conley's voice he heard, and Conley's friendly hand on his shoulder. But he didn't pause in his hurried stride back up through the tunnel. He heard other men coming behind them, following Conley's example, but he felt that it was too late now. There could only be a few minutes left. Ka'arji might even be dead. The dimming in its subtle way might have known the plot from the first. That would mean the dimming had won, for no man could ever be able to get back down to that control room. As they reached the street, Jim felt the power of the entity withdraw a little, as if that were necessary in order for it to embrace all their minds. A sudden new hope surged in Jim, a feeling that their combined forces might be a match for this thing yet. And even as they were racing back toward the central plaza, he was evolving a plan that might work, providing they had enough time. "Spurlin, you remember that surface car that brought us all here at various times? Do you suppose you might discover its secret? There are hidden electronic motors, I believe." "We thought of that before, but no man was ever able to get near enough." You'll get there this time. We'll see to it. Sperlin, when we reach the plaza, you take one man and head for that car. You spent 3 years building a spaceship, but now in as many minutes, you've got a tougher job. You've got to find those motors and solve them and have them ready for a quick departure. The rest of you men, listen. I've had a few dealings with this dimming, and I think I know its weakness. It's grossly egotistic. That's the angle we're going to play on, but our minds will have to be in perfect accord. I want you all to be silent, but listen carefully to my every word and concur with me mentally in everything I say. Strangely, those mental fingers had withdrawn a little, and Jim wondered why. There was something almost cunning about it. They reached the plaza, and Sperlin with one man hurried to the surface car on the opposite side of the square. The others, more than a score in all, stopped before the building that housed the entity. Jim knew that there could only be minutes now. Even as he was formulating words in his mind, he felt the dimming's faculties expand again, surge out prodigiously to envelop them all, and with it came raucous mental laughter. The thing was laughing at them. "Steady, you men," Jim said in a quick undertone. "Get ready now." And Jim laughed in return, laughed aloud and shortly, for beneath the dimming's laughter he thought he detected a false note. He felt that it was bluffing, stalling for time, but why? "All right," he called aloud, "you have won. You have defeated us here, but in defeat we can laugh, for this will be your last victory. You will get to Earth, but there you will meet your end." Jim felt the power of the thing reaching out in a fierce resentment, but he continued tauntingly, "You will see that the Earthian mind does not fear you. They will seek you out. We have weapons to combat you that the Martians know nothing of. You will not last long on Earth. If Brullo alone kept you here in thrall, Earthmen can do that and much more." Jim had other words to say, mocking words, but he did not get a chance. The dimming lashed out with a terrible, unsuspected force. For a single second, all of Metonic was livid under a garish, unbearable green as the men were beaten down to their knees in a huddled, miserable group. Buildings blurred and wavered and seemed to topple. The Earthman's consciousness dangled by a thread. "That is only a tiny sample of my power," the thought came lashing at them. "That is to teach you not to drive me to anger again." The men rose painfully to their feet, clinging together, but Jim was exultant now. He could not have told why, but he felt that in that one supreme burst of anger the dimming had expended most of its power, and that is what he had been counting on. "Your Earthian minds are stubborn, very stubborn, but I like that. I think I shall like Earth. Tell me more about the weapons you have there, the scientific devices you will use to combat me." What about Sperlin? Had he failed? That single surface car was their only escape from here. It seemed hours since Sperlin had raced across the plaza toward it. "We're lost, Jim," Conley whispered wearily. "We're beaten." "Oh, no, we're not." For suddenly, strangely, the dimming did not grasp their minds anymore. It was slipping away, and they felt strangely free and buoyant. But why? Why should it withdraw in its moment of triumph, just as it was learning what it wanted to know about Earth? In an awful moment of panic, Jim thought, did it read in my mind something about Ka'arji? Does it know what Ka'arji is doing? Simultaneously, there came a shout from Sperlin across the way, and it was a triumphant cry. "Hurry up, you men! We've got these motors going, but Lord knows—" Sperlin's welcome voice. Jim found himself pounding across the plaza behind the others, as in a dream he could hear the smooth threnody of the motors. And for one last time he felt the mental power of the dimming reach out, but it was half-hearted and uncertain. It wavered a little and seemed vaguely bewildered. Jim even paused in his stride and looked back defiantly. He felt it trying once more to grasp his mind, then it fell away disheartened. Not until then did the truth burst upon Jim, and he realized what was happening. He reached the car last of all and dropped exhausted across the threshold as the reaction of all he had undergone suddenly hit him. He felt hands pulling him in and other hands sliding the door closed behind him. Even then, the car was moving away, gathering speed toward the single obscure tunnel leading up and out of the vast cave of Matonac. 8. Jim knew nothing more until he struggled up again from the vast depths of darkness. This time his mind felt blessedly alive and buoyant and free. He simply lay there against the soft cushion and let the strength flow back to him. He sat suddenly erect. He was alone, and the car had stopped. He looked out into the white expanse of the polar cap once more. He hurried to the door and was relieved to see the rest of the men gathered outside, staring at something and talking excitedly. He joined them. Conley greeted him and pointed silently. Barely a mile to the north from whence they had come, a great greenish display suffused the lowering sky. "It started a moment ago," Conley said. "I think we got out of there just in time." Hardly had he spoken when all of the ice-capped terrain beneath the light collapsed into a vast hollow miles wide. It happened silently, abruptly. Seconds later, faint rumbling shook the ground. It was final. The greenish display had vanished, and only the hollow remained, as if a giant had plunged his thumb into a rotten apple. Conley sighed and turned away. "When I think of poor Wessel and the others buried a mile below there." "They got," Jim replied caustically, "just what they asked for. You'd better hope that entity is as dead as they are." "No doubt about that. But I can't understand it, Jim. I thought sure we were lost. When it was browbeating us there in the plaza, what happened after that? All I remember is running for the car." "What happened," Jim replied softly, "is that a wild hunch of mine worked. Did you ever indulge in Martian systems, Conley? It's horrible, vile stuff. Makes anyone except an addict violently ill. And it hits you suddenly like a barrage of rocket blasts. Well, I gave a whole pouch full, Kaarji's, to that dimming. Do you know, despite it being an other-dimensional entity, it had some very human qualities. Apparently, it was curious as well as egotistic. It must have investigated and then absorbed the tis stems, and it became violently ill, just at the right time for us." Sperlin had been trying desperately to get the motor started again, but to no avail. He now approached the others with a worried frown. "Those motors are so constructed that they can work in two ways. First, they can operate from a direct electronic beam. That's how Barullo controlled the car from a distance, and that's the way we've come as far as we have now. But with the destruction of Matonac, all the beams are gone." "Then you mean we're stranded here?" Conley pictured hundreds of miles of ice still lying before them. He remembered that the cap had already started its breakup, and no man could ever get across it now, not afoot. "On the other hand," Sperlin was saying hopelessly, "the motor should work from the electronic emanations of that new metal we found, even a tiny amount of it, but," he waved his hand to the north, "there it all lies, buried. We'll never get to it in a million years." Defeat was in his voice. For a moment the men milled about, looking at each other helplessly before Jim remembered something. "I have gone through too much," he grinned, "in the past few days to let a minor thing like this stymie me." With a feigned nonchalance, he reached into his pocket and drew forth a piece of metal. It was the rounded medallion which Kaarji had given him, and he'd forgotten until now. Sperlin's eyes lighted. He seized it eagerly and went back to work. Jim looked again toward the vast hollow to the north, and he spoke softly to Conley standing beside him. "Sperlin's wrong, though. We'll get to that metal again, and Sperlin will see his super spaceship come true. It'll be a tremendous mining job, but, well, at least we know the metal's there, and it'll wait for us." The sudden hum of the motors was a welcome sound in their ears, and minutes later they were speeding smoothly back to the south. End of section 9.